When we come to the third seal, and again we read this earlier from Revelation chapter 6, the third seal brings famine upon the face of the earth. Once again, when you go through the Old Testament, a number of times God indicates that famine, lack of food, is a form of his wrath or judgment upon human beings here on the face of the earth. It's significant to note with the third seal in Revelation 6, verses 5 and 6, that John said in verse 6, I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see you hurt not the oil and the wine. The implication is, whoever that speaker is the one who is authoritatively controlling that famine. He's determining how scarce food will be, and therefore how much food will cost, and he's determining what is not to be harmed and what will be harmed. Now, who is that person that's determining that? Well, the person has the voice that John heard from the midst of the four beasts. If you go back to Revelation 4 and 5, the 2 preceding chapters before the one we're looking at, you'll find that God the Father is seated upon a throne in heaven in the midst of the four beasts, and you also see that Christ, the Messiah, the Lamb, is standing there before the throne in the midst of the four beasts. So that the voice here is either that of God the Father or of Christ the Lamb. They are in control of that famine, which would indicate again, this is an expression of God's wrath or God's judgment upon human beings upon the face of the earth. When we come to the fourth seal, in Revelation 6, verses 7 and 8, we read earlier from verse 8, John says, I looked, and behold, a pale horse. His name that sat on him was Death. Hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. 1/4 of the world's population being annihilated through these 4 means. The sword, which is another way of saying war, hunger, which is another way of saying famine, and death, literally pestilence, and beasts of the earth, wild beasts attacking and killing human beings. Now this is very intriguing. 1/4 of the world's population destroyed through those 4 means. Why I say that's intriguing is this. When you go to the Old Testament, there are places where God indicates that war and famine are expressions of his wrath, pestilence as an expression of his wrath, wild beasts killing human beings are an expression of his wrath. But even more intriguing is the fact that you sometimes have a number of those 4 items lumped together where God is indicating those are expressions of his wrath. And perhaps the most significant passage along those lines is in the prophet Ezekiel chapter 14 and verse 21. And I'd like to read that passage for you as well. And by the way, in that context of Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 21, God uses one of the Hebrew words for his wrath, and it's one of the Hebrew words even used for the day of the Lord wrath in other passages in the Old Testament. But this is what he says in Ezekiel 14, verse 21. For thus says the Lord God, how much more when I send my 4 sore judgments upon Jerusalem, the sword and the famine and the noisome beast and the pestilence, to cut off from it man and beast. Same 4 things described for the 4th seal of Revelation 6, and God says that those are his 4 sore judgments. I was fascinated in studying this that some very prominent, highly regarded Greek scholars declared that when John recorded what will happen in the 4th seal, he was practically quoting Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 21, and basing really the 4th seal on Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 21, so that, again, the 4th seal is an expression of God's wrath upon the earth.